Dr. Nuria, you've talked about the need to neutralize radical Islamic forces and jihadi forces before the Middle East can move ahead. How does that happen at this juncture? Does it happen through international intervention? Does it happen, as you mentioned at the end of your talk, can the Arab world, led by Egypt and Saudi Arabia and the GCC, put together political will and have the capability of self-securing, as you will, in this new Middle East?
What I say about the question that you asked is, first you have to control Turkey. Turkey has to control its borders. Most of the foreign fighters coming into the Islamic State come through Turkey. And Turkey has the means to stop that. This is one. Second, you have to stop the flow of money. The flow of money comes from private sources, most of it. It might be a surprise for you, but most of the money to the Islamic State comes from private sources in Kuwait and the Gulf states. Saudi Arabia and Qatar fund charity organizations that help and finance those organizations. The Islamic State is not getting its money from the oil. The oil there is a very bad oil, and it sells maybe $2 a barrel. So it's not the money doesn't come from there. So controlling the money, controlling the borders, and then leaving those regimes who are fighting for survival do the job. They know the job better than us.
Yeah, thank you. Professor Rabinovich, a question for you. We talked about federal arrangements as a theme throughout this session. When we look at the Kurdish regional government in northern Iraq, we look at self-control, we look at perhaps an emerging democracy, we might be able to say, or attributes of democracy, not a full democracy, but certainly a full functioning autonomous area. And now you have the Kurdish regional government in Syria that calls itself the Federation of Northern Syria, the three cantons, and it seems that they're putting together, like their brethren and sisters in northern Iraq, the beginnings of what they call a federal autonomous area. To what extent should we look at the Kurdish experience as a potential model for other statelets and other autonomous areas in the Middle East?
Going back for a moment to Sykes-Picot, one of the victims of Sykes-Picot were the Kurds. The Kurds definitely are as much a nation as everybody else. They are a people, and politicized ethnicity means nationalism, and they, according to the principles of self-determination, should have been given a state, but for reasons at the time, they were carved up among the states of the region. It's very difficult for me to envisage the Kurds moving from where they are now to full-fledged sovereignty. I think because you have to look at the Turkish state. I think one of the most important revelations that came out of the recent years was how weak actually the basic structure of the Turkish state is. It was a common assumption in the Middle East and in the world that Turkey is a coherent nation state. It's a very powerful state, large army, strong economy, one of the G20. And Erdogan, since Turkey was rebuffed by Europe, began to develop sort of imperial ambitions in the region known as Neo-Ottomanism. Now, more recently, call it the intellectual father of Neo-Ottomanism, has just been sacked by Davutoglu, the prime minister, was sacked by Erdogan. And it turned out through mainly what events in Iraq and Syria that Turkey finds it very difficult to function effectively across its borders, or even to control the borders, as we just heard. But, and it has a Kurdish minority of its own of at least 20%. And in the Turkish view of things, if there is Kurdish sovereignty across the border, either in Iraq or Syria, that's a deadly threat to the foundation of the Turkish state, and they will not hesitate to invade and nip such a state in the bud. Plus the American resistance to the idea of Kurdish full independence in Iraq, because even Obama, when he stepped out of Iraq, wanted to show that the job was done, and to see the collapse of the Iraqi state would not be good from his perspective. And of course, as I mentioned, there is greater Arab resistance to the breakup of any Arab state. So my sense is that the Kurds would be wise to enjoy independence de facto without seeking the euro, because this would just lead to another warfare.
Thank you. One last question, for the same question for the both of you. And we turn Ambassador Freddie Eitan, our chairman, began with an impassioned assessment on the Palestinian issue as part of this larger discussion on the Middle East. In light of these discussions about new models, new arrangements, what would be the and in light of the fact that Jordan and Palestinian areas and Israel have talked about confederal arrangements in various shapes and forms and sizes at various times in history, even beginning in 1985 when it was approved by the PLO Legislative Council, as Hani al-Hassan told me just shortly before his death some years ago. What is the logic today of talking about a more stable arrangement where Jordan and Israel become the anchors of security and the guarantors of some sort of federal arrangement between the Palestinian areas as some sort of independent area and Jordan? Is there a logic to talking about that again, or are we still in the same discussion, in your view, about a deep Israeli concession and to create yet another, a 23rd Arab Muslim state in the context of the destabilization of this region, 100 years after Sykes-Picot?
I can only repeat what Rabin thought about that at the time. He thought definitely that after reaching an agreement with the Palestinians, that the best solution for the three states would be a federal solution. So I believe that going federal would give a viability to the Palestinian areas and create, I would say, a deep hinterland for Israel, which would enable Israel to control the border, the Jordan River, which is essential for our security.
Professor? Well, I believe in the old maxim that good fences make good neighbors. The Arab, when Hani al-Hassan spoke about the federation, it was still a manifestation of the Palestinians' resistance to the notion of Jewish statehood. That there'll be a federation, it may not be a Palestinian state, but also there wouldn't be Israel as a Jewish state. And actually you have three reluctant partners. I mean, Jordanians are very worried that this would spell the end of Jordan as it is. The Palestinians want their state, and Israelis definitely are ambivalent. I cannot see how you take these ingredients and convert them into a viable agreement. Clearly, this is not a good time for the final agreement on two-state solution on all levels: in Israel, among the Palestinians, the regional situation, and the international situation. I mean, right now, I mean, the French are convening a conference when you have an American administration that is not interested in the Middle East. To those who have not read the profile of Ben Rhodes, the strong person in the National Security Council in the New York Times 10 days ago, I strongly recommend that you Google New York Times Ben Rhodes profile and read it. How Obama's right-hand person in the National Security Council speaks about the Middle East, America and the Middle East, and about the foreign policy establishment of the United States. So I think we'll have to see the Obama administration out, another administration in place, committed to making a serious investment in the Middle East. Hopefully there'll be a better regional situation, and we can then deal seriously with the Israeli-Palestinian issue. In the meantime, my view is there's definitely no need to exacerbate the situation. There's no hope for finding a final status agreement right now, but there is a very broad spectrum of measures that can be taken by Israel in Gaza and in the West Bank to improve the current situation.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, would you